Hello, hikers. Green Giant here, one of your hosts. This week I have a really sore throat. It hurts to speak. So, our good friend Daniel is going to run the show.
You're going to school! Live from Happy Camper Studios in the heart of Snellville, Georgia, this is Stories from the Trail. I'm your host, Daniel Pitts. I'm joined today by Fozzie and Reptar. They know what they're talking about. I have no idea what I'm talking about because I've been on one overnight hike and I've got questions and they're going to answer.
So just to reiterate what you just said is that we're covering ways that you can physically prepare for a thru hike.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I did very minimal preparation for my Appalachian Trail hike. I did put on a pack and loaded up with something like 30 pounds and walked around with that on. But I live on an island that is flat. So basically I would just try to find staircases and stuff like that.
I was reading a thing about this and it said if you live in a place like that, it's good to try to do that in the sand. It'll give you distance.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did some beach walking.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think if you live in a spot where you don't have a lot of hiking easily accessible, like if you live in a major city or something like that, I think running would be a really good way to prepare for a thru hike, because what that'll do is build up your endurance.
Mm-hmm.
I know I stepped foot on trail with a couple people that were just joining me to see me off, and they didn't hike much at all, but they were avid runners and they were crushing miles.
Really?
Yeah.
I think a big thing that people don't really think about when they start and they're in a situation like you is you got to have a lot of balance. I mean, I know a lot of people trekking, but I mean, you have to. It's not like running on a sidewalk, roots and rocks and all kinds of stuff. You need to have a good form of balance.
You're definitely right. I mean, the trail is nothing like the sidewalk. But I've been pretty active my whole life. I was an amateur skateboarder for 9 years.
There's a balance right there. That probably helped too.
And I did a little bit of snowboarding, but
balance.
Yeah.
I think the only problem with coming back to the running thing, I can see the logic in it, and it will, to a certain extent, sort of get you trail fit. The only issue with running is the increased chance of injury. I started running before I did the PCT down in 2010. Well, I didn't start running. I ran for a few years on and off, but I figured the same thing. If I did some running, then I could sort of get quick fitter. The only problem was I got to a runner's knee about 6 weeks before I was due to go out to the PCT, and I very nearly didn't go because of the injury. Luckily, I had a good physio, managed to sort it out. But personally, when I do my next trial, I wouldn't use running as a form of getting fit, literally just because of the increased chance of injury. It would put me off.
I could definitely see that being the case.
But then again, I am an old fart, so I can't get away with stuff now that I used to when I was 17.
Well, another thing that I've read about hiking, I don't know what y'all did about this. I read that you don't ever want to wear a brand new pair of hiking shoes when you start the trail. You want to break them in weeks or months before. Did any of y'all do that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I wore my hiking shoes, or the shoes that I started the trail with anyway, for probably a good 2 months prior to stepping foot on trail.
Did you know about that then?
Yeah, I had done a little bit of research, watching YouTube videos and stuff. So
right.
Not just your trail shoes either. It kind of goes with most of the equipment, especially the stuff you're wearing, like your rucksack and your clothing and that sort of thing. A lot of people sort of go out to the trail with all their new nice shiny gear, which they haven't worn before, and before they know it, because it's all brand new and they're not used to it, it's rubbing in places where you really don't want it to start rubbing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I would definitely recommend people.
Shoes definitely. Shoes has got to be the number one thing you sort of wear in, and I don't know, sure. Maybe 50 to 100 miles, which is a big dent in a lot of trail shoes life, but it's worth wearing them in. Otherwise, you're just going to find out on day 2 or day 3, and that's not it's not a pleasurable experience, especially with feet.
And I think to kind of harp on that a little bit is that if you're getting blisters from your shoes straight away, that's not a good sign, because while it's rare, I've talked to people that have had almost 0 blisters the whole time. I had my fair share, but it wasn't really that bad. And I think that was because I was able to find a pair of trail runners that fit my feet well. So I think that's, try on a lot of shoes. Don't just go out and buy some shoe because so-and-so said it's the best shoe. Like, find out what works well for you.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a few pairs or a few brands to figure out which ones work for you. I had really bad blisters on the PCT, but on the AT, I kind of learned from the experience, and I think I just stuck to really slow hiking for the first 7 to 10 days. I was only doing about 10 to 15 miles a day. Toughened the feet up a little bit. Obviously, I'd done some training before I went, and then after those 10 days were out, then I sort of gradually increased the mileage, and I didn't really suffer from blisters on the AT. But the easiest way to learn about blisters is from experience, because if you do it once and you get them bad, you certainly don't want to be doing it again.
Well, here's my question. Do you want to start the trail in like a high shoe that you normally have? And maybe, because I always hear that people's feet expand as they're hiking and they get a bigger size. Would you start with the way your feet are usually, or do you just go up in that size from the gym?
It is true that, I think on the PCT, I went up a size over the course of the hike. It's a hard one to speak from experience, because my kind of shoes and my fitting are a little bit weird. I've worn Brooks Cascadias since about 2012. And I actually got offered a pair that didn't fit somebody else. Now, they were about a size and a half too big for me. And I didn't have much choice for reasons I won't go into. I couldn't get to a gear store to get a new pair. So I bought this pair. They were about a size and a half too big, and I thought I was going to get problems, but I had no problems at all with them. I usually have issues with the front of my feet are too wide, and what was happening was when I wore the Cascadias that was too big, my feet kind of shifted back in the shoe, and the front of my foot shifted away from the front of the shoe, so I wasn't getting abrasion at the front. And that's kind of the weird way I wear my shoes now. I just wear Cascadias, which are a size too big for me, but I think if you certainly start off with a shoe that's a decent fit, and trail shoes, you can only really sort of get 600-700 miles out of, perhaps more if you're lucky. And when they're worn out, go and get them refitted again, don't assume you're going to get the same size again, because you might have gone up to or you might need to go up to a slightly bigger size.
And what kind of strategy are you going up a hill and going down a hill as far as how you put your feet?
I don't even know if I've consciously thought about my feet going up and down a hill. I mean,
because I know going down a hill, you're kind of pushing your foot and your shoe. Maybe they're not right shoe, and I know that can do a lot of damage. That's how
I didn't have any issues. I was really dubious when I was offered this pair because of the fact that they were a size or a size and a half too big, and I thought, this just isn't going to work. They're just too big. But by some weird thing, I just discovered, the perfect trail shoe for me anyway, and the perfect size that was too big, and they just worked out. I didn't notice going downhill, sort of my feet, as you'd expect, would maybe slide forward and constantly hit the front of the shoe. And I didn't notice anything going uphill or indeed sort of on the flat. They just fitted. It just, like I say, just sort of weird way it worked out for me.
Well, is there a certain way that you approach going up and going down? Do you have like an action?
I think I caught enough of where you were going with that. Personally, what I did is I know some people don't like to use trekking poles, but I'm kind of a fan of them, at least on the uphills. And sometimes, depending on the terrain, I don't just step off of, rocks and things like that straight down. I'll kind of turn to the side and do like kind of a side step down because, I don't know about the impact as much on the feet, but I know on your knees over time, if you just kind of go gung-ho 24/7, you could end up with some knee problems. So, especially on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was a little, certainly more careful going downhill. Uphill didn't really kind of bother me. I mean, it was more a question of sort of pacing more than anything, because obviously you're tiring out quicker. So you have to sort of look at how far you're going to climb, what the elevation is, and pace yourself accordingly. Downhill, it does take it out on the knees a little bit. And it's true that sidestepping does kind of alleviate that, especially on the really steep stuff. I did use trekking poles. They did help uphill and downhill, especially taking weight off the knees. You can kind of lean into them. It's kind of like having two handrails when you're going downstairs. It's the same principle. They take a lot of the body weight and take a lot of the stress off your knees.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I had a question, like, what would you suggest someone who, they're going to do this in about 6 months, okay, they work out, they're in pretty good shape, but as far as actually the day-to-day minutia of being on a trail for weeks and months at a time, how would you get them to prepare for that?
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
I've got some follow-ups too.
I think it's kind of the same with a lot of activities, and you can go to the gym and these sort of things and do certain muscle groups, but I'm a great believer that if you're going out, or if you want to go out for a 200-mile cycle ride in 8 months' time, then the best way to train is to go out and cycle. If you want to go and swim 2 miles in 4 months' time, the best thing you can do is get in the pool and swim. And I've always thought it's the same thing for through hiking. Kind of look a few months, maybe 3 months before you're due to leave, and depending on your fitness, let's say you're moderately fit, just try and get out for a walk every day with some weight on your back. Gradually increase the weight. If you haven't walked for a while, just maybe do a couple of miles. Gradually increase it every week until you get up to maybe 10 to 15 miles comfortably. Obviously, if you're working, you need to do these sort of walks at the weekend, but just get out, do 10, 15 miles. with maybe 20 or 30 pounds on your back, wearing the shoes you intend to through hiking, wearing the rucksack you intend to hike with, and any other things that you intend to take with you on the through hike. And your body will get used to it. If you put your body through repetitive motion, the body's the body's wonderful. It'll learn. It'll realise at some point that, hey, we're doing this every day and we're doing a long one at the weekend, and your body will adapt to what it's asking you to do.
Well, I think it's also important that when you're carrying your pack with you, that you are very familiar with your gear. You know where this is, where that is, because if you just stuff it all in and go, you're going to get really frustrated when you want your rain jacket, when you want the dinner for the night, and it's all up the way at the bottom. I feel like you need to have an action plan as far as packing your pack and knowing how it is, and go walking and then take it out, have it second nature, and not just going with the flow. I feel like that'll take a lot more I know we're talking about physical with the trail and everything, but I feel like that'll take a lot of mental pressure off you. If getting your stuff together, getting your tent raised, getting all your stuff in order, I think it'll help take the mental pressure that I think everyone has when they're on a long distance hike. I think that'll take a lot of pressure off that.
I think, bringing up the mental aspect of it is equally as important. I think the trail it's very physically demanding, but I think at a certain point, maybe after the first month or so, it kind of just becomes a more mental game. I know that when I stepped on trail and the first time I saw a map after having hiked and hiked and hiked and realizing that, we weren't even 2 inches on this map of how far we had to go. I mean, it's a very daunting task mentally.
What kind of goals did you set for yourself when you just saw that? Did that discourage you, or how did you take that?
There's kind of a few different thoughts going through my head anyway. And, one is, oh my gosh, I've still got so far to go. The other one was, hell yeah, I've got so far to go,
Right. Yeah.
So part of it was excitement, and part of it was also kind of nerve-wracking because every mile is different. And so I would just say, obviously I went in with the mentality of, okay, I'm going to through hike this. And basically just tried to never lose sight of that.
Right.
But it's just one of those things. I feel like you just have to take it, a day at a time, pretty much. Listening to your body and what your body's telling you, and just going from there, not to overdo it, or if you're feeling real good, crush out those miles. At least for me anyway, it was more of a mental game than a physical one.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting point about what you just said about the how far you've got left to go. You can look at it in one or two ways. You can, see you've barely moved on the map, and you can think, God, I've got another 1,700 miles to walk on this thing. Or you can kind of think of the reason why you came out there in the first place. You went out there to hike 2,200 miles or 2,600 miles or whatever. It's a dream come true. It's a once in a lifetime thing. You might never do it again. So in theory, the longer you've got to go on that hike, the better, because that's the reason you're there. You're out there to enjoy it. So it's not a case of, oh my God, I've got all this, so many miles to do. It should be this is fantastic. Give me some more.
Right. And I think that ends up being the case. And if you don't realize that in the beginning, you'll realize it eventually, because I know, at least for me, when the hike was over, you're just kind of like, oh man, it's over. What do I do with myself now? Kind of thing. You're like, all I want to do is be out hiking more.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's my question. Like when you first start off, how do you assess what expectation you have for yourself from day to day? Like maybe the first day you say 8 miles, the second day you say 10. How do you come to these conclusions?
Well, in terms of that, I think you can go into the hike and have this, that, and the other planned out, but reality will set in the second you step foot on trail. And depending which trail you're on, the terrain on the Appalachian Trail is much more strenuous, I would say. But I went in there with a game plan. Okay, I'm gonna do slow miles in the beginning and slowly work my way up. And the timeline that I had established for myself prior to that was way off because I just had no idea what I was getting into,
Mm-hmm. What was your expectation, and then what was the reality as far as when you began?
Well, the expectation was, okay, I'm about to do this many miles on day 1, this many miles day 2, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reality was, oh my gosh, I've been hiking in the rain for the last 2 weeks, barely making the miles that I wanted to make. And all I want is to go have a 0 day and take a hot shower right now.
And how do you get over that? How do you mentally, push through that?
You just keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, no rain, no main, right? No pain, no main. So it's all just keep moving forward. They always say never quit on an uphill or a bad day or a day that you're hungry. But the thing is that it's always uphill and you're always hungry. So it's better to just embrace the suck and just keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, you'll be so happy with yourself. It's the hard times that really build the character of a thru hike, I feel. If it was that easy, everybody and their mother would be doing it,
It is. It's definitely not just through hiking, but anything, I don't know, any sort of sport or extreme sport or a lot of other things as well. Even, I don't know, doing a resume or writing a book or building a house or something. A lot of it is, or most of it is the mental game. I was listening to or watching some program on the TV the other night, and I remember a guy was saying that your body will tell you it's hurting a long way before it's even capable of getting into its reserve. So your body's your head's listening to your body. Your body's saying, look, I'm really hurting bad here. And your head's just telling you to stop. And you've got so much more left physically than what your head's telling you. And a lot of the time, you just have to tell your head to shut up and keep going. When you are cold, when you're wet, when you've done 25 miles, when you're hungry, when you've got another 3 miles to the shelter, and it's blowing a hoolie, you just got to kind of dig in and get there.
What about, I know the AT is a pretty high traffic trail, and you'll see grandmothers and grandfathers passing you on the trail, and you're like, I'm in my mid-20s. How are these people passing me? And like you're always comparing yourself to other people. And like, well, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And like, how does that work out?
Well, if you're worried about that, don't move to Colorado. Those, I'm telling you, those old folks out there just chugging up those 14ers, man. I'm sitting there. I'm like, man, what is going on? That grandma just ripped past me.
I feel like I was reading today about it, and it said that you do not want to come in with with a lot of pride. You don't want to be crushing it right from the beginning. You just want to take it how it comes. Don't worry about these other people. Worry about yourself. But how do you get that pride? Because everyone has a little sense of pride. How do you get that out of your head? Like, what the hell? I'm 20 years old. How is 44-year-old Gary Sizer passing me on the trail?
I
You know,
think to be honest, the mentality of most through hikers, or at least those that have done a trail, or most people when they're sort of 2 months into a trail, the mentality is, it's not a race. The only thing that most people are trying to do is finish the trail. They're not out to break any records. Okay, a few are, and it's not a race. I don't think there's many through hikers that'll be doing the AT or the PCT or the CDT or whatever, looking at the guy behind or looking at the girl in front, thinking they need to speed up because they need to get ahead of her, or he's catching me up, I need to slow down. It doesn't, through hiking doesn't work like that. It's not, well, at least not in my experience. I certainly don't think like that. If somebody passes me on the trail and it's a 76-year-old grandmother, I say, good for you. So I don't think there's, or I like to think that mentality doesn't exist on the trail, not in my experience anyway.
Yeah, I think, for me at least, I wholeheartedly agree with you. However, when I had first started, the guy that I started with had that similar mentality. He's like, hey man, we need to go faster, we need to go faster, we need to go faster. And we ended up splitting up because of that, because it was just, he felt the constant need to feel pressured to go faster, or be the fastest, and I just didn't want that pressure. And I'm really glad that we ended up splitting up. We still hang out. I ran into him on the PCT. We're still good friends, but I think it was different ideologies kind of going into it. And I mean, personally, I don't think people should worry about it. It's not a big deal. Who cares if X, Y, or Z is hiking faster than you or slower than you?
Yeah, speed doesn't. I mean, speed does come into it occasionally, but I mean, generally, you see some people running the trail and doing 25-mile days, and they'll do it in 4 or 5 hours. Or other people might take 12 hours to do it. I mean, most people, when they're fit, 2 or 3 months into a through hike, can pull in a 25-mile day. And the time is irrelevant. If you want to run it and do it in 4 hours, good for you. If you want to take your time and do it in 12, great. If you're sort of floating somewhere in the middle and you're looking at 8 or 9 hours, it doesn't really matter. It's not, like I said, it's not a speed thing. It's not how quick you walk. Everybody walks at a comfortable pace and knows what that pace is. Some are quick, some are slow. The important thing is not the speed, it's the mileage. You know what you have to put in each day. The amount of time you need to do it in. And that, if your target tomorrow is 20 miles and you pull in 22, then you've got 2 in the bank and you can do 2 less the following day. It's about pulling in the miles, not necessarily how quickly you do it.
But when I did my overnight hike with Gary, he was a lot faster than me. He's done this a lot more. And I did feel a big psychological pressure. Even though he told me, don't worry, do your own thing, there was still a very big psychological pressure when you're in a group full of people and one guy is just killing it. And you kind of want to be there. And, you're going and going and going. And, he's been sitting waiting for you for 20 minutes. You're like, oh, my God, I feel like crap. I feel like that would be a big strain on me mentally. Like if I was hiking in a group, because I know everyone gets in their little trail families.
Yeah, it's. I think most of the trail families are who you feel you can sort of get along with. Let's face it, if you're sort of spending 24 hours a day with someone, you need to be able to get on with them. But also, to a certain extent, pacing comes into it. Some of the groups hike at a certain pace and they'll kind of stick together. But even then, you get fast people in a group, you get slow people in a group, and the fast people will hike quick for a couple of hours and then they'll take 20 minutes out to rest, and the slow people will catch them up. And then they take 5 minutes, and then they're all sort of a group again. But I heard Green Giant was apparently the fastest through hiker on earth. Is this true?
He's pretty fast.
Even with an infection?
Especially with an infection. No, because I don't, but you feel, it was mental for me, and it was only a day. I was like, ugh, I don't want to. I always have this. I have this mental problem. And it's not just hiking. It's everything. It's like, I kind of had this way of thinking when I was in the Navy. I never want to let someone down. I don't want to be, they always say the weakest link, is as strong as, the group. The weakest person is the, strongest person in the group, or whatever, however that thing goes. But I never wanted to, like, I don't know, let him down. But it was all mental. It was in my head. I mean, he told me a million times that I didn't need to, run or anything, but it was always there. And I don't know how to get over that.
Maybe that will come, when you're actually into, you kind of realize that, I don't know, it's not a competition or it's not a race or whatever.
I just want to say on that note is just hike your own hike. I think that's like the reason that phrase exists. Yeah. So you're not feeling these pressures to perform to somebody else's expectations.
But all anyone talks about is miles. I did this, I did this, I did this. And so it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of conflicting. Everyone says hike your own hike, but everyone's like, oh, I did a 20 today. Oh, I did a thing. Let's do, because I know they do this thing where you hike 24 hours straight and you see how many miles you can get in that period of time. It's like, it just seems like a lot of social pressure to not be, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm
mediocre.
So
no one talks about the mediocre hiker. They don't have a trail video about a guy who took 9 months to do the AT.
It took me 6.5 months. I'm pretty mediocre.
Yeah.
It took me 7 months. It took me 7 months to do the PCT. It's I don't. Maybe you're just kind of building up. Maybe you're just sort of building it up too much. I don't know. And it sounds like
maybe
you have a.
This might just be me.
Maybe you just have sort of like I don't know, a team sort of mentality.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, it's more. I mean, through hiking, it's just an individual thing. It's just you on the trail. Yeah, there's other people around you, but if someone wants to go out and do 40-mile days, that's what they like to do. I mean, to be honest, I've done a 40-mile day a couple of times, and it was a great target to hit, but I wouldn't do it day in or day out because it would frankly just kill me, or I'd be off trail with an injury. You get to know what speed's comfortable for you. You get to know what distance is good for you. And I'm sure when you get a certain way into a through hike, what everybody else is doing kind of affects you, well, a lot less than it possibly would done at the start. It's kind of a bit of a learning curve, but you just sort of get into it.
To kind of talk about trying to overdo it and injuring yourself, that actually happened to the guy that I split up from. We started off at the same time, and he ended up actually having to skip some trail because he wanted to stay with his bubble, but he had to take, I think it was about 2 weeks off. And we only ended up finishing a few weeks apart, if that, in the long run.
That's the other problem with speed and pushing miles. It creates it takes a toll on the body. Can I just answer a question from Bunny here, who's asked me what personal hiking daily mile goal do I have when I hike? Bunny, I kind of touched on it earlier, but apart from the sort of training before I went out, before the AT and the PCT, I generally start off the first sort of 10 days. I'll do 10, maybe 12 miles a day. It's a little bit frustrating because I know I can hike more, but I know if I do hike more, then the blisters kind of flare up a little bit. After 10 days, I'll sort of average 15 miles, 16 miles, 17 miles for another 10 days. And then after that, I see how I feel. But after the first month, I'd certainly like to be hitting 20s and I guess averaging 25. I've done more. 30 is probably my upper limit in terms of just reaching a point where I get to the end of the day and I'm not aching and I'm not that tired, but I've still pulled a good mileage distance in. But generally, I suppose 20 to 25 mile days is a good target for me. I don't know about you guys.
Is that on both the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail, or?
The Appalachian, certainly. The Pacific Crest Trail, I was a bit naive. It was my first. I had done sort of longish hikes before that, about 1,000 miles, but the PCT, I was a bit of a novice in trial and error. I did start off too fast. I was doing 20. I think the first day I did a 20 miler, and I was hovering above 20 miles for the first couple of weeks, and I paid the price for it. I had blisters which never went away for the whole hike. But that's certainly the way I approached it on the AT.
Okay, well, this is something that I don't understand that I've noticed a lot lately. Everyone talks about hike your own hike, but everyone talks numbers. No one talks, okay, I'm going to go to this shelter today. How many miles is it? I don't know. Everyone talks about, I did this number of miles, this number of miles. And I think that's, maybe, I'm sure it's not just me. That's how the whole psychological, I've got to pound out this many miles because everyone talks about, I did this many miles today, I did this much. Everyone talks numbers, but then at the same time, they say hike your own hike. And to someone who's kind of new to this, that sounds very conflicting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that makes perfect sense.
See, I mean, like I hear y'all and I just hear numbers and numbers and numbers, but then I hear hike your own hike and I feel like it's two different things. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Well, I think, your hike might be doing 15 to 18 miles a day, whereas Fozzie's hike is 20 to 25 miles a day.
Why is it always about numbers is what I'm trying to get at here. Why is it always about numbers? Why?
You need to know what your numbers are. You need to know how many days you got to walk a certain amount of time. And I mean, I'm not as strict as some people. My plan is sort of fairly loose. I get into a town and then I look at the next town, which is maybe 100 miles, 120 miles up the trail, maybe 4 or 5 days. And I think that town looks good. I can get some food there. I get there and then I repeat it. Other people will do all these sums and figures and calculations before on a spreadsheet, so they've got this whole plan of the trail of what they're going to do. But at the end of the day, it's a long distance trail. It all comes down to numbers. Some people talk about it more than others, but you have to know to a certain extent how far you're going to walk over a given period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but it just always seems like people are comparing. Oh, you did 25 miles in a day. I only did 12 miles in a day. And I agree with you that you need to know your numbers, but numbers can also be a mental game. Wow, you did 25 miles. I only did 12. What the hell is wrong with me? And then you start getting in your head. I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's why I understand you need numbers, but I feel like it kind of does some harm too. But I don't know how you would get around that. And I don't know how someone who's first tackling this and everyone's talking about numbers and maybe they're at the low end and it's kind of discouraging them that people are doing, 12, 15, and they're only doing like 8 to 10. And it's kind of discouraging. And how do you get over that?
Well,
I mean, you say hike your own hike, but it's like, it's everywhere, it seems.
For me, I called people like that mayflies because they start in May and then they fly by you on trail and then you probably never see them again. So I didn't really put too much thought into it. I was just like, oh, wow, it's another really fast hiker. I'm still enjoying the crew that I'm hanging out with, the speed that I'm going at. And, yeah, of course we did focus on mileage because like Fozzie was saying, you kind of need to know X distance to the water source, the shelter, the towns, etc. And I think that, once you find a crew that you're comfortable hiking with, you tend not to really worry about what everybody else is doing. At least that's how it was for me.
How important is it to find people that you click with? Or, I mean, do most people find people they click with, or do they usually just do their own thing? And what are the pros and cons in that?
Well, I think finding a bubble or a group of people has multiple benefits. You've got safety in numbers. You've got people that'll watch your stuff if you need to go do something, if you're in town. You have people that'll help split the cost of a hotel room or something if you want to go that route on a 0 day, as well as just the companionship, the friendships that you make. Like I know that I still keep in contact with the people that I hiked back in 2015. One of them just texted me right now. So, I think meeting people, at least for me, was important because it just helped kind of, create a different sense of what the trail life was like, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we might be getting a little bit off track here. I mean, the original subject matter was kind of like fitness and how you prepare physically for the.
Well, it's physical and mental, and I'd say 90% of this whole thing is mental, and let's get back to the physical. I think one of the major.
I'm curious if there's apart from doing also, my method of sort of going out and just doing hiking to sort of get trail fit. Reptar, did you do anything apart from sort of hiking? I mean, did you do any gym work? Did you do any sort of cross training, cycling, anything like that, or would you recommend anything else?
Personally, no. For my AT hike, all I did was strap the pack on, and I did walk up and down staircases quite a bit, just trying to get myself in shape. But for the PCT, like I did almost zero preparation. And I mean, that kind of bit me in the butt because while the terrain was easier and we were able to kind of do bigger miles right off the bat, I ended up hurting my foot like a week and a half in, which sidelined me for a few days. But yeah, I mean, personally, I totally agree with what you were saying about the best way to go about preparing for something is to get out there and actually do it. Go out there and throw that pack on with all the stuff that you plan on taking with you and testing out how your shoes feel, how all your gear works, and see how your body feels.
It's definitely what worked for me in the past. I know, I mean, I sort of flit around with the gym. I sort of do it for 2 months and then I get fed up with it. I won't go back for a year later. But I think there's probably a lot to be said for maybe joining a gym, or certainly at least doing some sort of research on your muscle groups, especially your legs, maybe your core, finding out what sort of muscle groups are going to take the brunt of it, and maybe doing some work on those. I never did it, but I'm sure people do the gym, go down the gym and work on those groups.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I know something that's really popular with the hiking community is yoga. I know that's a really big thing, and I think that's really important to help your balance and stretching out. Stretching out is, I think it's more important than than going to the gym or anything. Just keep yourself limber so that you're able to take the impacts that the trail's going to throw at you.
Yeah, I agree. I did when I went out to the CDT in 2015. I was doing a little bit of yoga each day on the trail. I do yoga, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times a week at home, only for about 15 minutes a day. But it's incredibly helpful, not just with hiking, but just with everyday life, your posture and strength, and keeping your back and your spine in good condition. But I know a lot of people that do yoga on the trail, and yeah, it's. I think a lot of people still think it's underestimated because it just kind of looks like a gentle, sort of exercise, and you need to be pushing hard weights or going out and doing 40-mile days with 50 pounds stuck on your back. But yeah, good point. Yoga's a very good one.
Well,
yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one too.
I think it helps your range of motion because, I mean, if you can move and you're limber enough, I mean, I think that's going to help because if you ain't limber, then you're gonna tear something. You're gonna do some damage.
Yeah. It's based. I mean, yoga is kind of basically all about stretching. It's a lot of it's based around the spine, but a lot of it is stretching. I've got another question from Barney actually. Do I have a routine that I do? Like what positions? Barney, I don't know if you're familiar with yoga at all, but I mean, I do, like I say, about 4 or 5 times a week. It's only about 15 minutes. If it's anything more than that, I tend to sort of get fed up with it and stop doing it. So 15 minutes is kind of manageable. But I do something called the sun salutation first off, which is kind of series of positions starting upright. And it kind of goes round in a circle. This is going to be explained really badly. Each one probably takes about 40 seconds, and I do 8 repeats of those, which kind of loosens everything up. The back, the legs, all the muscle groups, kind of warms everything up. Then I do a twist of the spine to the right when I'm sitting down, hold it for about a count of 100. I twist the spine to the left and hold it for a count of 100. Then I do a position called the cobra, which is kind of lying flat down, keeping your hips on the floor and bending the upper body sort of back up, kind of if you can imagine the head of a cobra. And that's pretty much it. Sometimes I throw some other stuff in there, some non-yoga stuff, some push-ups and press-ups, but I found those sort of exercises in 15 minutes a day pretty much keeps me in half reasonable condition.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of videos, actually, yoga for hikers, or a couple of videos on YouTube. So if you've never done yoga or anything, I would probably start there, maybe a month or so before you hike, and like get your range of motion going and, ready for the hike, and just continue that, because I think it seems like most of the injuries, could be prevented from stretching out and just, I don't know, being more in touch with your body. I think that's really important to understand what your body is telling you.
Yoga is also, it's a good point. You said that yoga is also a great way of stretching down at the end of the day. Stretching is important, and if you are doing yoga, you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're doing your stretches and a lot more as well. Interesting about the YouTube thing, probably an obvious place to look, but not one.
And it also helps you mentally, because if you because it's not just stretching and different poses and holding different poses. It's also about breathing. It's also about controlling your breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. And you don't really think about that during the day, but like when you slow down and you do the steps and you just take it all in, I feel like that really helps your mental state, and maybe the voices in your head shut up for a minute.
Yeah, they do actually, because there's not much to think about when you're doing yoga. The only thing I think about when I'm doing yoga, a lot of the time the exercises are repeated on, you do an exercise on one side of the body, or you bend a certain way, and then you do the opposite. And if it's a series of exercises like the sun salutation, when I do 8, the only thing that's going through my head, once I've blocked all the external noise out, the only thing that's going through my head is how many I've done. So I'm on sun salutation number 4, and I just keep number 4 in my head. I finish that, then I switch to my left-hand side, and I'm thinking number 5. And there is the mental. It is good psychologically as well. I know a lot of exercises, especially the ones where you really have to focus on the balancing. I mean, a lot of it's strength, but a lot of it is balance, and your body's capable of a certain amount, but you find yourself, or I find myself, sort of staring at a point on the ground, maybe a foot in front of me, and doing certain exercises where you do have to do this balancing thing. And you can tell when you're doing it, you're thinking, this is physical, but it's also mental as well. It's kind of work in your head. It's difficult to describe, but you have to focus mentally to hold that position.
And another thing about the physical is drinking water, because that's going to help you a lot physically. It's going to help you with cramps. It's going to help you with I don't know, just to get through, easier. Because sometimes you'll be hiking. Like when I went hiking, they were like, drink water, and sometimes you don't even think about it. You just don't drink. You're like, I'm okay. But you need to kind of, what was y'all's approach to drinking water and, keeping it so that things didn't happen? You didn't get dehydrated. I mean, like, did y'all have the same issue as me? Because when I was hiking, I would just hike for miles and miles and miles, and I wouldn't take a sip of water. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit dizzy. I mean, what's going on? And I wasn't really thirsty. So how would you approach drinking water, and like when to do it?
Well, obviously, I would say drink when you're thirsty. But sometimes
that, you don't feel it. Did you ever feel like that? You just didn't feel like drinking? You were just like, hey, I'm just walking, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, boy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the easy ways to tell if you're hydrated or not is the color of your urine.
Yeah.
So if your urine is dark yellow, you need to be drinking some water. So it's kind of a little trick that I used, at least, or the people I was with used, so we knew if we were drinking enough water or not.
Yeah, that's pretty important.
Or even, and just to add to that, if you suddenly you realise you haven't taken a pee for 5 hours, you're probably dehydrated as well. You do sort of get a feel for it. I mean, even in the really hot stretches, like in Southern California on the PCT, I think at most I was drinking a litre an hour. I remember taking 7 litres of water for a 25-mile stretch with no resupply for that 25 miles. And I remember taking 7 litres, and I think I only drank about 5. There is sort of advice about how much to drink and how it does depend on the individual. Some people just get by on a lot less water than other people. Some people need more water. The heat obviously affects it as well, how far you're walking, whether you're going up at elevation, how much weight you're carrying. But it's another thing that just kind of comes to you, like sort of after 2 or 3 weeks on the trail, you know what you need to be drinking. And the P test is a good one. If it is too dark, you need to drink some more water. What I always went by was it's better to drink too much to a certain extent than not drink enough at all. And also little is often, instead of sort of downing a litre in one go. Decent advice is to sort of sip little and often. Having said that, I also, when I got to water supplies, I used to filter or treat a litre of water first, and I used to drink that straight away, so it's kind of inside my body working. Then figure out how much I had to the next water supply. Let's say it was a couple of hours, 6 miles, I'd filter another 1.5 litres, 2 litres, something like that. But it's another thing that comes with experience on the trail once you get into your hike.
Well,
yeah, I agree.
I know another test is
up.
Yeah, I know another test is like you can like kind of pinch your skin. If it goes back really fast, then you're hydrated. If it goes back kind of slow, then you might be a little dehydrated. And I know like if you get cramps and if you're breathing heavy, there's a lot of signs that you probably need to drink water. And it's like what you said before. I think it's better to drink maybe too much, but then we have another problem. Okay, but the next water source is such and such miles. I have this. How do I even that out?
I think that's kind of something that you learn while you're hiking.
How long does it take to figure that out? If you just start, like when you first started the AT, how long did it take you to figure out your water regimen?
I'd probably say it took about a week or so to really have it dialed down. But the thing was that when I was on the Appalachian Trail, water was so abundant that
Yeah.
it was never even a concern for us until we got, I think, to New York.
Yeah.
Whereas, like on the PCT or whatever, it's
Yeah. How do you
much
work
more
that?
scarce.
I feel like on those trails, you're almost counting on those water caches that people leave out for you. And if you don't make it in time, bad things could happen.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to depend on those. Like they tell you specifically, do not depend on those. Although I'm not gonna lie, there was definitely one time where there was a big group of us and we were all depending on it because it was a really long stretch without any water. And I went through, I think, 5 liters and I got there with a sip left. But yeah, I think it just kind of goes back to what Fozzie was saying about cameling up when you get to water. Just go to the water source, have a snack, chill out, and just drink as much water as you possibly can and let that do its thing and carry out, hopefully the right amount of water to the next source. And usually you can gauge that by how fast you're hiking, what other people around you are carrying and things like that. So, unless you're starting. Go ahead.
No, sorry, go on. Carry on.
Yeah, so unless you're hiking entirely by yourself, I think it's you're going to have some sort of marker to help you figure out exactly how much you need.
There's a few comments coming up. Gazelle said she set an alarm for every 30 minutes to remind her to drink. That's an interesting one. There's a few people asking about electrolytes here. What do we use? Did we use anything at all? Personally, on the PCT, I use a product called Emergency, which we don't get in the UK, but I think it's fairly common in the States. It's like a little sachet of powder you mix with your water, and it's got basically the necessary electrolytes to replace all those minerals and salts you lose when you're sweating. I can't remember what I used on the AT. I certainly used a powder again. I think it was Gatorade powder. I can't remember. And I think I went back to Emergency because Gatorade just kind of tasted wrong, personally. Emergency had a nicer taste to it. Some other comments here about, I never know how to pronounce it, Nun, N-U-U-N. Is it Nun or Nun? I can't remember how to pronounce it. That's the little tablets in the tubes. I've used those before. They're quite nice. Protein powder is another one. Protein powder. I used to put protein powder in at the end of the day. Sometimes I carried a green powder. So when I stopped just before dinner, I'd throw a sachet of Emergency in a bottle, scoop of protein powder, scoop of greens, and shake all that up, which sort of got to work before my dinner. But electrolytes is an interesting one. It's no use drinking water if you're not taking your electrolytes and replacing all those salts and minerals. Otherwise, if you're constantly drinking water, you're just washing everything out of your body, and you sweat. Your body's sweating all of that out. You've got to replace it. It's really important.
Gary wants to know. Tell us a trail story about a time you weren't physically prepared.
I think probably the PCT. I mean, I think without sounding like I'm bragging, I think I kind of nailed the start on the AT, but that was just because of experience, and that experience, or that bad experience, was on the PCT, just when I think I had a kind of like a mental mileage target of 20 to 25 a day. And what I didn't take into account was, it was incredibly hot. which didn't really sort of hit me physically too bad, except for the fact that it made my feet really sweat, which just brought the blisters out. And I also go straight into it on 20 miles days. If I'd approached it as I did when I had more experience on the AT, and again started with these 10-mile days and gradually sort of ramped it up to 20 miles, I would have been in a better position. And I had blisters for the entire PCT just because of that ignorance about starting and doing more distance than I should have done. But I certainly learned from it.
Yeah, mine would have to also be on the PCT, even though I already had the AT under my belt. You know, I kind of just went to it, I guess, kind of just being overconfident, thinking, oh yeah, you know, I'll get in shape once I'm out there again. And it was just stupid. Because like I said, I ended up hurting my feet like a week and a half or 2 weeks in, and that ended up kind of being a reoccurring theme on my hike, to the point that I had to get off for a doctor's visit once. But yeah, I think in terms of the physicality of it, yeah, just preparing your feet or your body to do those kind of miles, I would definitely suggest people go out and actually try to hike, you know, 15 miles in one day, 10, 15 miles, and just see what happens, you know.
You have to, really. I mean, it's not just good advice. I mean, you could almost say it says you can't just turn up at the start of a 2,500 mile trail in your new shoes and your new gear and just go. It's just asking for trouble, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's kind of funny. Well, not really funny. It's kind of sad. But I was out in Colorado hiking up a 14er, and we ran into this girl that looked like she had just left an REI or something. All of her gear was totally new, and she was on vacation, and she just wanted to hike a 14er while she was out there. And we met her, I don't know, probably 1,000 feet or so from the summit, and all of the toenails on her toes had fallen off because she bought the wrong boots.
How do you prepare yourself for those elevations? Because I know when I've been out west, it's a total killer, and I just don't know how you prepare for that kind of stuff.
If you're doing the PCT, I didn't have any issues with elevation. I know people that have had some issues with it. The only thing I noticed about elevation for some reason was a taste of iron in my mouth. I don't know why, but when I was up high, especially in the Sierras, I just had this kind of taste of iron in my mouth. I assumed it was blood related. I don't know. But the PCT, I mean, they say if you go into altitude, then obviously acclimatise to a certain amount of elevation per day. But the PCT, I think I'm right in saying this. I hope I'm right in saying this. Obviously, sort of check it. But I think the PCT, by the time you get to the Sierras, you've kind of gone up on a gradual slope anyway. So the trail's kind of you've kind of acclimatized on the trail anyway. And altitude, and certainly altitude sickness, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes it can affect anybody, regardless of your age, regardless how fit you are, regardless how much training you've done. It can sort of get anyone really, but certainly acclimatized. Maybe it's worse before, if you're certainly doing the PCT, maybe sort of going out for some hikes at elevation, you know, sort of, I work in meters, not feet, but maybe sort of 6,000 feet, and then gradually sort of each weekend maybe go out and do a little bit higher. That probably can't do you any harm before you get out there. But the PCT, in my experience, the sort of elevation tolerance was sort of done for you by the time you got to the Sierra and those high elevations.
Yeah, the PCT definitely had a gradual slope to it to help you acclimate to it, as well as one of the things that we did was kind of just once we got to 10,000 feet, we camped out close to 10,000 feet, just to make sure that we were all good. And if not, that we didn't keep going up. Because another thing is, even if you've never had elevation sickness before, it doesn't mean that you can't get it. So, you could have hiked to 14,000 feet before or something, but that doesn't mean that the next time you do it, you won't get elevation sickness. So I think that's something to be mindful of.
That's very true. And it's probably also worth saying to anyone who's going out, especially to do the AT or the CDT or sort of long hike where you go out to elevation, to do a bit of Googling on altitude mountain sickness. I think generally, in my experience, well, not in my experience, but I think the accepted figure is 2,500 meters, which off the top of my head is probably about 8,000 feet is where AMS generally is accepted to sort of start, or where the symptoms might occur. And also the easiest thing to do if you're feeling sick or lightheaded, or you're just generally feeling really unwell, go down, descend. That's the one surefire thing to alleviate the symptoms. And what everybody recommends is just go down. Don't go any further up. Try not to stay where you are. Just descend, and the symptoms will alleviate the lower you go.
I see Giselle is asking a question about the JMT and if that's gradual. I'm not sure what the JMT starts at, but it's up there. I think it tops out at 13,000.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But I think you're starting around 8, 9, 7, maybe.
I think you're right. The JMT is pretty high up. I don't know the exact elevations, but I think I'm pretty sure in saying that, if you sort of get out on the trail from day one, you're kind of at risk of that AMS, especially, the JMTs as a popular trail. It's people don't go out there and, like we mentioned on the PCT, you get this gradual acclimatization. You go out to the JMT and from day one, you're straight there in the thick of it. So that's certainly worth maybe doing some pre-training and going out at altitude and gradually building up to it, instead of just going out there and starting it from day one at elevation. It is kind of asking for trouble.
Have you seen these elevation masks that some people wear? It looks like Bane from Batman, though, but it's supposed to kind of mimic being in higher elevations. I saw it a lot when I was out in Vegas. I didn't know if y'all knew anything about those. I
have seen them. The first time I saw them, I was looking at these on Amazon yesterday, because I do a bit of cycling training at the moment. It's winter here, and I tend to sort of work on a trainer inside. But I just kind of stumbled on these altitude masks, and there's good research behind them. I think there's some sort of little switch on the bottom that you can like set it to 500 meters altitude, or 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. And I think basically it just restricts the airflow and hence the oxygen that you're breathing. And the science sounds good. I don't know if I'd wear one out hiking, but if you want to sort of go out there looking like Darth Vader, then.
Well, do you think it helps? Because I know, like, you always hear about these people from Colorado. They come down here to like near sea level from being, a mile up, and they're like blowing you away. But as far as someone who's at a lower elevation going up there, it's a kick in the teeth. And I've heard that those things help a lot to acclimate yourself to that kind of environment.
From my limited research, and when I say limited, literally yesterday stumbled across them, the research and the science behind it sounds pretty sound. If you if you restrict going up at altitude, the oxygen is thinner. This is what's causing the problem a lot of the time. So it would sort of follow on that if you're at a lower elevation and you're training, you're wearing one of these masks, you're restricting oxygen. It would kind of follow on that you're sort of training the tolerance in your body to exert yourself with less oxygen at altitude. So it's certainly worth certainly worth looking into.
All right.
Talking
Well,
about the respirators, another thing that I've seen, at least in Colorado, people that were out hiking 14ers, I would see they have air in a can that has like a little mask on it and like an aerosol can. So you just kind of push down on a button and breathe in and get a fresh dose of air.
like oxygen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's like O2 in a bottle. I think you can like buy those in China as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of those booths out in Vegas, but I felt like it was a ripoff because I had this thing around my nose, and I'm like, "Am I getting anything, or I just paid $10 for nothing?" But we're about to wrap up. I know Gary wanted to wrap up at 8:30. Are there any last minute pieces of advice any of y'all would want to get that we haven't gotten to? Maybe wrap it up real quick.
Yeah, very quickly. And I just say one thing we didn't cover, and I'm a great believer in, despite a lot of people disagreeing with me and calling me a sissy, is a rest day. I always try to take one complete day off per week on the trail. I'm a great believer in the body needs rest. You can hike 20, 30-mile days indefinitely, but if you're taking a day's rest at least once a week, you're giving your body a chance to heal, take a day out, let it sort itself out, and then start the following day. And I'd recommend, ideally, or certainly in my experience, one day off per week, or at least once every 10 days.
The coveted zero.
The zero.
All right. Well, I just want to, before we wrap all this up, to remind people about the Patreon for the show. Doing this show is a lot of fun, but it doesn't come cheap. There's bills to pay. There's hosting to, do, I guess. And, if you're not donating, consider donating and, help us out a little bit, help us pay the bills and, get the word out. And another thing I want to say that Gary hasn't said, review us on iTunes. It's very important. That's how we get more exposure. That's how we get more listeners. That's how we get more info, because the more people we have here, the more info we get. And that's almost more important than your money. So getting the word out, doing those reviews on iTunes especially, really helps us. And the more people we have, the more people we can help. And I know that's a big thing that everyone wants to do. And, we're a community here. And so, it'll be good to help each other out and, just spread the word.
And if people may also share all of this stuff on the usual social stuff as well, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever your preference is, get it out there, share it, send the links out. Let's get some more people aware.
And, there's always more to learn. I mean, you can always do a Google search, but there's always little tidbits that experienced hikers like y'all have brought to the table that you can't just Google. And that's why I feel like podcasts like this are very important. And these classes that we've been doing week to week, I feel like they're really getting out, tidbits of information that you're not just going to get from a internet search, because this is real people that have, experienced this stuff, and they know what they're talking about. And it's good to just hear them and have the back and forth, especially for me, someone who's never done this stuff, who would like to do this stuff in the future. I was doing a lot of peppering y'all with questions today, and it really opened my eyes to all the minutia of hiking. It's not just, one foot in front of the other. It's a whole heap of things to wrap your mind around.
It is. Just a quick message here from Gamira to Reptar and me, which is, how do we find you? The easiest way, for those who don't know, I'm a thru hiker, a writer as well. Most of my books are on Amazon and Nook and iBooks. And you can find me on my website, which is Keith Foskett. That's KeithFoskett. .com. Reptar, I think she directed the question at you as well.
Yeah, if you guys want to check out some of the stuff that I've posted, you could just Google Reptar Hikes, REPTARHIKES, and it should pop up with YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention about the Patreon. Every day after this is taped, Gary puts out the raw video, unedited, all the mistakes, all the, technical difficulties. And I find that almost more enjoyable than the edited version. So, I mean, if you're really liking this stuff, consider donating $1 a month, But I just wanted to get that out there.
It's audio, not video.
Audio, I'm sorry.
He's here. Gary, how's your voice?
Let's see. I sound. It hurts. Listen.
Oh, poor Gary.
He's that character from The Simpsons. The guy that always works at the fast food. Hi, guy. Can I take your order?
Stories from the Trail is a production of The Trek. Zach Davis, Editor-in-Chief. Your hosts are Green Giant and Voldemort. Our music is by Lee Rosevere. Support the show at patreon.com/storiesfromthetrail. Give us a 5-star review. Give us a 5-star review. Give us a 5-star review. I'm sorry, Dave. I cannot open the pod bay doors. The show is mixed and edited in Blanket Fort Studios, which is just me in my blanket, with a basement over my head. What? Thanks for listening. Ha ha ha. Oh no. It hurts to laugh.